Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. In today's episode, we're going to give you guys a bit of an overview of The Forest of Death, which is our newest feature that is ready for release. Could potentially already be out by the time that we are releasing this podcast, but we basically wanted to go ahead and break it down in the processes that we see when it comes to making a movie, and hopefully this will be very entertaining for you guys. And if there's any filmmakers out there, hopefully you guys get a lot of tips as well too. So as always, be sure to take a look at our Discord channel because that's the place to be. That is where you can be part of the process. You can be in the movies with us. Is where all of our open auditions, all of that fun's take place in the DVS Films Discord. So, really, I think this is kind of like a similar episode to one of the earlier ones that we were doing when we first started, where we would take a look at kind of the four major areas of filmmaking: pre-production, production, post-production, and then marketing. But everyone likes to discount marketing. So really, I just wanted to kind of take the time to take a look at this one from that context. It's been a while. We filmed two more movies since we have basically finished the process of The Forest of Death. Really, now we're just still on that fourth stage, which is the marketing. So we still have that final area to get through, but really just kind of want to take a look at the first two elements of the pre-production and the production itself in this episode. So, Forest of Death, it was always kind of, you mentioned it before, we'll do something we're very confident with, and then we'll kind of take a little bit of a step outside. We always knew Forest of Death was going to be one of those, mainly because the concept was big and it was a concept we've never done before. Usually when we like to scale up concepts, we like to have a proven, appeal to it, whether it's The Haunting of the Suicide House or what we do with Into the Forest 1 with now Into the Forest 2. But Shapeshifter, it was definitely a concept that was out there, but it was also a concept that both me and you really like. So you want to talk about how, when we started floating that concept out, this was probably like right before we started filming Murder House, where your thoughts were when, coming together with this film.
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to do a shapeshifter movie. The Thing is one of my favorite movies, so I wanted to take a stab at it. If people do like the shapeshifter concept, it's very low budget friendly. As in, if someone becomes a shapeshifter, it's basically their body double. And you'll see that in Forest of Death when the shapeshifter essentially takes over another person or mimics them. We just use the other actor, and they just change the way they act. So there is a way to get around this on the indie low budget scale. We do have a mask for this one, but we're very delicate in how we show it. So if this concept works, I think you can kind of create a really cool movie. But once again, we went from Murder House, which I knew was going to sell, which I knew was going to do very well because we've done it before, to Shapeshifter, which is a brand new concept. I have no idea how the market's going to react to this. The reviews are starting to trickle in from the screener links that we sent out. The feedback seems to be pretty good, but I mean, it all comes down to, does the mass market like shapeshifter movies? And the main issue that we have is there's just not a lot of shapeshifter movies out there, which kind of gives me, hesitation, kind of goes against what we're saying. If you're looking for a new movie idea, if you're looking for a new genre, make sure there's other movies out there that are doing a similar concept. Because if there's a lot of people doing something, usually they're doing that for a reason, and the reason is it sells. Not a lot of shapeshifter stuff out there, but I'm hoping that we can stumble upon something that resonates with a lot of people, and we can kind of do a grittier version of this movie. The one we did shoot was homage to the 70s and 80s horror, and I think we hit it really well, from the cover to the title to everything. It screams 80s, so I think a lot of people will get a little bit of nostalgia effect to it. But I do think the higher concept, the better concept for this movie is dark and gritty and, maybe found footage. So I'm really eager for this release. I'm eager to get the feedback. Obviously we're going to get better. We're going to take the negative reviews in stride, try and figure out what we can do better as a production company. And then hopefully it's popular enough that we can either get a sequel in there or just get a complete remake of this movie.
Yeah, I think that really, sums up kind of the overall thoughts on what we're looking at when it comes to The Forest of Death as a movie. I mean, the shapeshifter concept, it is that little indie hack that you mentioned where the villain themselves is the person. So it's a very easy way to get through that limited, production value when it comes to actually having a monster or something crazy. You did mention we did have a mask for it, but I think that mask is used for maybe 3 seconds of the movie entirely. But again, it's always more of that, we want to keep the monster off screen. So that's just kind of a natural effect with it too. I think to me, Shapeshifter was really interesting because it opens up a ton of plot things you can do. Who's the shapeshifter? Who's it here? Who's it there? There's a lot of fun things you can do. You've already mentioned that there's a dark and gritty one there. There's definitely a dark and gritty found footage one there as well too, which we're very excited for in the sense of, you can really adapt it. But do you want to kind of talk about the flexibility of having a shapeshifter and what that does allow to do? Because that was always something when writing this, that was my favorite part, is you kind of have the ability of, I've always wanted that shapeshifter to be basically a little bit of a POV, just to show that it's out there. You get enough lore, and then basically something happens, and now the audience is playing who's the shapeshifter, who's not the shapeshifter. I would say we made it very easy for the audience this time around, but I think that plot in itself leads to a lot of suspense of, is this person who they say they are?
Yeah, 100%. From the feedback from either reviewers or people that I've shown it to and asked for feedback, the main thing is they want more. And with a lot of reviewers, they'll make blanket statements like that. So we kind of have to try and figure out, what do you mean by more? And this was a trend in, the Discord reviews as well. We got to figure out what more means. And what I'm thinking, my initial reaction is, they wanted more mystery element to it. They wanted more shape shifting, the shapeshifter to bounce around different characters, and you can kind of make it like a whodunit movie. So I think when they want more depth to it. But this is a good problem to have because, we can easily remake this movie and we can add more plot to it because we have the basic beats. I'm just making sure that people like this movie. The first one that we did is just very straightforward. It goes from A to B very, very quickly. We have pacing in mind all the way through, which is why we hit you with a lot of montages. I know there's a lot of montages in this movie, but it's done for a reason, to keep that pace moving all the way throughout. But I think with the second one, if people do like this one, we could slow it down. We could kind of build more tension. We could add more depth to the movie. And I think it'll give that more, which people are kind of looking for. The fact that they're asking for more, though, is a good sign. It means they're engaged in the movie, that they followed all the way through, that they just weren't satisfied. They want more stuff. And that's a good problem to have, because the 2.0 versions of our movies always have more depth. And, we learn from our mistakes and we'll make a better movie the second time.
Exactly that. I mean, I think it is going to be a concept that we continue to revisit. When it comes to the actual writing of it, I think it did get a little bit convoluted at sometimes. Just in kind of a little bit of the details of who was it going to be, kind of as we already mentioned, and what was going to play out. I know I had a big fight for Fire, and Fire played out because Fire looks great. So that was kind of the one add on to basically the lore. But really, we had the structure ready to go. We were just kind of nitpicking the details. And I think this is, again, just something to filmmakers out there. I mean, once you get to your 12th feature, or your 11th feature, it's really easy to kind of understand, this is the pace, this is the type of scare, this is the pace. But I just kind of want to talk about the structure for it, because I think after Girl in Cabin 13, after Murder House, we were very confident in our structure ability. We had way more works before then with The Hateful Eight, but a lot of that was usually assistance with different writers and things like that. But I think this one, we were just very confident in our structure. We took a lot of things that we knew worked from other movies that we had done, so we were kind of there. But do you want to kind of talk about how having the experience going into the Shapeshifter allowed us to really kind of get through that writing process really quickly, because it was only really the tiny details that took us a bit.
Yeah, and once you really kind of master pace, I think that's the first fundamental of filmmaking. And I see a lot of people struggle with this, especially on the indie side. The movie's just very long, they're very slow. Then they miss on a few beats, and then they're kind of screwed essentially, because you can go 20, 30 minutes without anything taking place. And some of the hardest scenes are the lore building scenes. It's hard to get your actors to act properly. It's hard to develop the lore in an interesting way. And, sooner or later, you're going to get stuck with these 10-minute dialogue scenes and people are going to turn your movie off. Say what you want about this movie. I'm extremely proud of how quickly it moves. Yeah, it's only an hour 15, hour 18 minutes, but from start to finish, it goes by very, very quickly. It feels like a grittier version of Are You Afraid of the Dark, just a single one-off episode. And that was kind of the intent. And I think we learned a lot from our other movies. Murder House had a little bit of slowdown in the Ouija board scene. This one, it flies all the way through. I think if there's any kind of slowdown, it's sort of the middle with the Roger lore scene, but it's going to be how invested you are in like that Roger monologue and the stories that he's telling. If you're interested in that, we'll breeze through it because right after that's when it really accelerates. But I thought, Ben did a great job, and it was such a crucial scene to make sure that the audience is engaged in watching what listening to what he's saying. So, and it's crucial because we also need to set up essentially the world that we've built, and that was his job as that Roger character. But for the most part, it goes start to finish really quickly. Very happy with the pacing. And I think this was a milestone in DBS history as far as I don't think we're going to have a movie slower than Shapeshifter. I know Into the Forest goes by very quickly. The Roger Project, I don't think has any stoppage at all. So I think we really kind of took a step up in, pacing. And once you get that structure, then the easy part is just filling in the blanks, choosing scares that have worked before, adding new scares. And that's more production kind of stuff because you kind of see what works and what doesn't work. But I think, learning how to pace a movie properly is a skill in itself. It's very, very difficult. But I think we kind of nailed this one.
Yeah, I mean, I really do agree in the sense that the pacing is kind of the ultimate overall that you see with the writing, and the details are kind of just being hashed in there. Another thing that I want to kind of go about with the pacing element that I think it's really something that we did for the first time is since we had the other elements of the plot and everything ironed out, we were very comfortable with it. I think this is the first time we really kind of got into a few downbeats that are actually a little bit funny. So we'll see if you guys think that they're pretty funny, but I think the easiest way to make a pacing move and or scene move is a little bit of humor in the downbeats, and then also just being very specific with like the lore. So I think those were the two things that we kind of focused up on. One was being a little bit more funny when we had the chance to be, and also utilizing like the passive pop scares as like ways to do that. And then, as you kind of mentioned and already alluded to Ben with Roger, just having someone that can really pull that performance out and always put them near fire can really kind of make it an engaging one. But do you think having the scares pretty much ready to go allowed us to focus in more on trying to improve what has always just been the biggest issue for us?
Yeah, and the downbeats are always difficult, but I thought we did a really good job in this one. If you look at all the downbeats, they are either funny, or they kind of deliver a little bit of lore, or they develop like the character a little bit. So they all have purpose. And then the downbeats that we kind of removed and just put montages to push the movie forward. They just allow the movie to go faster. We're not, getting stuck in the mud by having these scenes that may or may not hit. And I think now I'm a little bit more confident in our ability to, write unique downbeat scenes. So if I were to go back, I'd probably remove 2 of those montages. I know we have a lot of them playing cards where we can probably add in just a little bit more character depth, which is going back to, the audience wants more. So it's like, how do we get more out of this movie? Those are little downbeats that we can add in a little bit more character depth. But I think you have to have the scares, and having scares that we know work allow me confidence to put in those downbeats, because the last thing you want to do is have 2 or 3 downbeats with only one scare in there, and then your scare doesn't hit. All of a sudden you're not making a horror movie, you're making a drama, and horror people are going to turn it off. So I think, pulling from these scares, knowing that these scares work, doing our pre-production on the scares, just allowed us to, invest a little bit more in those downbeats. I'm interested to see the reaction to the downbeats, because once again, it is a little bit humorous, is a little bit lighthearted. We have, upbeat music, and then the end of the movie is very gritty. And I'm kind of interested to see people's feedback, because it's not, to me, this isn't a scary movie. But it does seem like we're scaring some people towards the end. So we're kind of getting that mixed thing. I don't think I went too far down the 70s and 80s hole. So I want to see the reaction to that. Once again, you don't want to confuse your audience. And that would be my only concern, is that, after that fire pit scene, the dark and grittiness in me kind of turns up, and you kind of lose some of that fun horror kind of stuff. But we'll see. I'm really excited to see the reaction to this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it really does have both of those elements in there, and it's always so interesting. I mean, we got a lot of feedback from our super fans already, but it's always interesting to see kind of how it does with the general public as well, too. So that kind of wraps up the writing phase of it. Now getting into pre-production, just kind of in the casting elements. This was something where, we had a lot of prior actors, mainly with the leads with Chloe for Summer, from Girl in Cabin 13, Tyler as Kai from The Haunting of the Murder House, Dylan as Dylan, and then Stephanie was the only additional actress that we brought on that basically wasn't part of the main cast. And I think that made the pre-production process very, very straightforward, in the sense of, hey, we need to get these people. We've worked with them before. Dylan, no, we had worked with Dylan in Murder House. I mean, he proved himself there. So, like, really, we were just kind of a lot easier, a lot less of a risk. Again, as you kind of grow and develop as a studio, we get talented people that we know work really well on set. I think that made the pre-production process, and also made a lot of the on-set process very easy.
Yeah, so if I'm going to go big with a story, I want to make sure that I can play it safe with the actors. I worked with these people before. I knew they're not going to break. I knew that they're going to do proper pre-production. I knew that they're going to put a lot of time and effort into this movie. So I could focus my time mainly on, making sure I know how to shoot this properly, making sure the scares work, making sure the story's solid. I don't need to handhold actors, making sure that they're doing pre-production. I meet with them once a week and go over all the script and, different ideas that they want. But for the most part, I trusted them. The only new people on there were Stephanie and Ben. I know Stephanie did some local stuff that I've seen before. She always did a great job. And Ben he was doing Zoom calls in front of a fire pit with me, so I wasn't even worried about him, which is good. And it's something that I recommend to new filmmakers, because if you're going to take a shot, either take a shot on acting and then focus on a story that you've either done before as a short, or you feel comfortable that you could pull off, or take a shot on a crazy story, but fall back on actors that you can work with, that if things kind of get a little bit behind or a little bit tricky, that they're not going to walk off set, they're not going to break, that they could power through it with you. And that was kind of the philosophy with this one. With the one we shot after this, Into the Forest, I was very comfortable with that script. It was a concept we did before, so I felt better, flying out actors and then working with them a little bit more in depth than I did with the actors on this movie. That being said, always do your pre-production. Try and do as much pre-production with your actors as possible. They enjoy it, they feel comfortable, and when they step on set, they're going to feel confident. But, my advice to new filmmakers, especially if it's your first film, try and find actors that you've worked with before or you feel comfortable with, so you can have the time to focus on the story and get it done. Because the first couple of movies, man, we were up against the clock constantly, and having actors that you have that rapport with, that you're comfortable with, just makes the production so much more smooth.
Yeah, it really does help out when you have that process of just basically an understanding how the scenes work, what you need to do. And I mean, it's something where just it really shapes the set, having an existing language already developed between you and the crew. So that's why we absolutely love it. One of the major additions to the Forest of Death, we did have Katie was officially the first DBS fan that found us through TikTok and joined our Discord. She was a voiceover. She was Dispatch. She was 213 in The Haunting of the Murder House. So we even managed to get someone in there in the post-production. But the first on-set actor, very first person to be part of this production, is one Howard Hawkins. I just kind of want to talk about how, going out and having him be part of this production really is a catalyst to changing completely how we see about our future projects, how we work with our community and everything there. Because at this point, we're kind of skeptical. Can we really rely on these people or things like this? And, Howard showed up to the plate and he hit a home run.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in that Discord, everybody who wants to be an actor with DBS should thank Howard personally because he really was the guinea pig. Um, and he did a lot of pre-production. I remember meeting him via Zoom numerous times. He did a great job on his wardrobe. He did a great job on his dialogue. Really worked hard on this character because I had no idea how much time I needed to spend with him. He had prior acting experience, but I mean, a lot of people say they have prior acting experience, and it turns out like it's student films or just some stuff that's never been uploaded. So I wanted to make sure he was as confident as possible. And then on the schedule, I allotted about 3 hours of time to get his scene done. Now his scene was is a pretty significant scene. I think he had maybe a page and a half, which on a Hollywood set would be a whole day. So we gave Howard 3 hours, figuring, I just need to get him to say a couple lines here, and I could cut it with Dylan's dialogue. It's basically a phone conversation. So I just needed him to come in and just basically say one line, and then we could cut and then do another line and then cut and then do another line. Was like what I was thinking in my head. Worst case scenario. Well, Howard came on set and he knocked that thing out within 30 minutes, and he had no problem doing all the lines. I didn't have to cut anything, and every take was absolutely perfect. And usually what we do is we do one or two by the book that I'm happy with, and then we let the actors kind of improv a little bit. Once Howard started improving, it just got better and better and better. So I think we used up maybe an hour and a half of that. He gave me 10 to 15 really good takes. The ones that worked the best were the ones that he improved. And Dylan even took some lines from that improv conversation, improved his own stuff. And it made a really cool scene. So, he got it done in half the time. He got it done twice as good as I thought it would be. But it just shows you, how good that the Discord and, the people we pull from the Discord can act. They just need an opportunity, basically. And that's kind of our philosophy. It's a philosophy moving forward. We're casting 20 people each movie. And, with each time we bring on a new actor, they get another rep and they get better. Howard, from this movie to the last movie that he was in, so he's been 3 movies in a row now. His performance was fantastic. So I'm personally seeing the growth that he's putting in that character and the growth of him as an actor. I mean, 5, 7 more movies, and this guy's going to be a star.
Completely agree. And again, this just really kind of kicks off the entire process for just how we look at making our movies from now, and we'll continue to make them. So huge shout out to Howard Aries in the Discord. Make sure you just give him a little thank you, guys. I think the last thing I kind of want to talk about is, it's always a factor that we have when we do a movie of just kind of the location and everything and like finding the areas out there. It's always quite a risk for it. Really, this is something I think we'll pick up on part 2 in a little bit more detail, but just kind of scouting for those locations and things like that. I think I just kind of want to talk back to, something that we always agree upon, where the script can change dramatically based on where you can actually shoot, where you can actually show up. This is what you can actually do. And I think we already kind of had that more in mind with, the Forest of Death than we did with Girl in Cabin 13 and we did with Murder House. Because I feel like in Cabin 13 and Murder House, there was still a lot of scenes writ for like a specifically style of location, where I feel like with Forest of Death and our movies now, we kind of take that level of like detail out, knowing that when we get there, this is kind of going to be what happens, and how that's a super important skill for any indie filmmaker.
Yeah, I totally agree. With writing the scripts now and moving forward, I just assume we're gonna have basic stuff. So there is no specific scenes that are tailored to specific rooms or specific locations. It's just basically, look, I have a cabin and I have woods. And then when I go on set, if there's something cool, like this one had a really cool like area underneath the Airbnb. So it was kind of like up on stilts, so it didn't flood. We can utilize that. So you have like happy surprises as opposed to just disappointment that, your place doesn't have like a basement or an attic or a really cool location. And I think that's a good way to write scripts as an indie filmmaker. unless you're spending a lot of time location scouting, or you have like a really cool location that you're guaranteed to use, then you can write that stuff in. But in our experience, finding locations is extremely difficult. It's extremely time consuming. And, we're writing these scripts without a location in mind. So that's kind of our philosophy. And I think, we've done that with the last three. With Into the Forest 2, I did have the opportunity to go location scout beforehand. So we kind of wrote some stuff in there as far as different locations and stuff to use. But trust me, it's a much easier process when you're getting on set and you're walking around. You find like a cool statue, or a cool little location in the woods. We had the river in this movie was really cool. So you have happy surprises as opposed to like a little bit more disappointment, which was like in the murder house where the house just didn't really feel too haunted, didn't have an attic, it didn't have a basement, and a lot of those scenes were written for that kind of location. So unless you have something guaranteed locked down 100%, I would write the most basic script that you possibly can, and then, explore the location a little bit more when you're actually on set.
Yeah, it's always the fun part, kind of going around, taking a look at what different options we have. That's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. We're going to go ahead and talk about part 2, where we go into the actual production and then the marketing or the production and post-production, and basically where we are currently at with The Forest of Death. Be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online, because that is the place to be. That is where you have to go if you want to be part of our movies, be part of the process, and we will love to see you there. But until then, have a good one.